Niners have 7 players, Chase, that are set to return in the second half of the year. Juwan Jennings, who, I think that hip injury might be a little bit more of a story than people are talking about. He wasn't in the facility at any point last week, so I don't know where he was or what's happening there. But Shanahan made it seem like he's coming back after the bye. Then there's Christian McCaffrey with the dual Achilles, Greenlaw with his Achilles, Jake Moody trying to come back from a high ankle. Talanoa Hufanga's got a broken wrist that he's going to play with an air cast at some point. Givens has got a groin strain, and Yatir Gross-Matos, I believe, has a knee injury. Those are 7 guys that are all set to return. And that's one of the answers that Lynch had on the radio to, hey, are you going to be active at the trade deadline? He's like, hey, we got 7 pretty good players that are coming back that are almost like giving us a trade. Now, you don't know who's going to come back, who's not going to make it back, so on and so forth, who's going to have an impact once they get back. But of those 7 players, which one's going to make the biggest impact in the second half of the year?
I think the easy answer is Christian McCaffrey. I just am very worried about the bilateral Achilles tendonitis and how durable he's going to be. Because when I look at what all of these doctors have to say about that injury, he might look good against Tampa Bay if he can come back against Tampa Bay, but there's no telling that injury is not going to flare up once again. But when you think about the impact of Christian McCaffrey, I think that he can really help to change this Niners offense. Why? Because we've seen a year and a half of a body of work in which he's been able to do that. So diverse and versatile with his ability to run in between the tackles, get out to the edge, catch the ball out of the backfield. He's such a good pass protector as a blocker. He can also line up out of the slot. And a lot of NFL players around the league have said, like, if Christian McCaffrey was a slot wide receiver, he could be one of the more dangerous wide receivers in the game. And looking ahead for him, I'm interested to see if he's able to extend his NFL career as a running back, take off some wear and tear, and play a little bit more in that role. But when you think about his impact on this Niners offense, especially in the red zone and how good they were in the red zone last year, they were the #1 touchdown efficiency rate team in the red area last year. And a lot of that was because of Christian McCaffrey. But if I'm the Niners, I want to manage his workload. I want him to be fresh in the playoffs. And I want to see Jordan Mason and Isaac Rendo still involved because I think they're really special players, and I love what they bring to the table as far as the physicality and the overall ability as a complement to Christian McCaffrey. So CMC might be the easy answer. The most logical answer, I think, is Dre Greenlaw. Outside of Fred Warner, this Niners linebacking core has really struggled this year against the run and against the pass. You insert a player like Dre Greenlaw, who is also coming off an Achilles injury, for him, a torn Achilles. And I think that he can really be good in coverage against the run, injecting fear into the opponent, bringing a level of physicality and speed to that team. He can really have good range sideline to sideline, and him alongside Fred Warner shores up the second level of the defense that has been a little bit leaky this year because Devondre Campbell has been, for the most part, bad. I will give credit where credit is due, and I think you pointed this out after the Cowboys game. He played a lot better against Dallas than he has all year, and he needed that performance. But let's keep it real. He is not Dre Greenlaw, who in the playoffs last year had a nearly 90 coverage grade according to Pro Football Focus. So I think it's Dre Greenlaw who makes the biggest impact if and when he comes back. High-level player, and he's helping to fill a void at an area of weakness for this team all year.
One of the stats that I thought was amazing that I had to throw your way today is the 49ers in fourth quarter points allowed are 30th in the NFL. And last year under Steve Wilkes, they were #1 all year long, and they're 30th. Did the Niners, in your mind, make a mistake getting rid of Wilkes for Sorensen? Or is the regression all based more on personnel and it's really has nothing to do with the coordinator?
I think it has a little bit to do with personnel. And Nick Bosa's having an all-pro caliber year. He leads the NFL in pressures. But who else along that defensive line do you really fear if you're the offense? Leonard Floyd's been up and down. Malik Collins is good against the pass, not great against the run. I'd say he's a very solid player. The Niners wanted to be more cost efficient, moving off of Eric Armstead to bring him in. I think he's been pretty good. That other defensive tackle spot, it's a question. Javon Hargrave is out for the year. And so you have issues, I think, along the defensive line. And we've seen this because I think the Niners to start games, we've seen their pass rush clicking. But as you get into the second half, that pass rush starts to die down. I think that's a lack of depth and overall talent. At the linebacking spot, you're missing Dre Greenlaw. You've replaced him with Devondre Campbell, not the same player. At corner, Charvarius Ward has taken a step back. Diamador Lenore is playing at a Pro Bowl All-Pro level, and now you have Renardo Green, who's been one of the highest graded corners in the NFL, not just rookie corners in the NFL. And with his emergence, he's helped out that secondary, but the decline of Ward, who, by the way, thoughts and prayers with him after him and his family lost their 1-year-old daughter, and maybe that impacted his play. He's also been dealing with a knee injury, but from a football standpoint, just hasn't been the same guy. And then at that safety spot, you've missed Tufonga. I think that Jair Brown hasn't taken that leap that I thought he was going to. And so you've been hurt a little bit there. And I think what the Niners kind of wanted to do was to get back to what they were doing on defense under Sala, under Nico Ryans, and they got away from that a little bit with Steve Wilkes, who was running the Niners scheme, but from his vantage point, being a byproduct. Thing. So I think it's a combination of both. I think that the lack of coaching has hurt San Francisco. We've seen that because all of the breakdowns that in the secondary. How was CD Lamb 10 yards open on back-to-back touchdowns against Dallas last week? It can't happen. That's coaching. And then I also it's a lack of personnel too.
Last one for you. Shanahan's dad, Mike Holmgren, and George Seifert, all Hall of Fame semifinalists. If you get one vote, who are you giving it to?
Ooh, that's a good
tough
one.
Because they're all very comparable. Like there's no right and wrong answer here. This is a lot of shades of gray. Holmgren and Shanahan all have almost identical resumes.
Yeah.
And George Seifert, of course, would get my vote. Just he did go to 5. He did have 5 Super Bowls as an assistant and as a head coach. So I mean that to me trumps what those guys did. But then George also struggled in Carolina at the end, and there are people that would absolutely tell you that Mike Holmgren and Mike Shanahan were better coaches than George Seifert. But George Seifert was a phenomenal defensive coach with an emphasis in the secondary. He was a great secondary coach. Who would get your vote out of those 3?
I think there's something to be said, too, for George Seifert having to take over for Bill Walsh. Like, that is not easy at all. And he was able to maintain high-level consistency and high-level winning after that era. And so that's really difficult to do. That's replacing the shoes of a Phil Jackson, replacing the shoes of a Bill Belichick, some of the great coaches of all time. So that's not hard, or that's not easy to do. That's very hard. So I might side with you, go Seifert. But Holmgren and Shanahan, they've both played pretty integral roles in ushering in an era of offensive football that I think we still see today and was very important at the time.
Last question for you. One of the things that came up, somebody had a tweet this week that was really interesting. It was after Anthony Richardson, said he was tired and got benched for Joe Flacco. And then suddenly people are noticing that there's an awful lot of these young quarterbacks who have hit the league and are already considered busts. I mean, Kenny Pickett is a bust. Anthony Richardson right now is a bust until proven otherwise. Justin Fields. Russell Wilson looks worlds better than Justin Fields. Will Levis has been terrible. Zach Wilson people consider him a bust. Trey Lance is a bust right now. Bryce Young's a bust. Mac Jones is a bust. And yet, I brought this up the other night on a live stream. If we had asked the same question a year or 2 ago, it would have been like, well, Baker Mayfield's a bust and Sam Darnold's a bust and Geno Smith's a bust. But now those guys have kind of, been reclamation projects in their own right. I bring it up because in some ways I kind of feel like I know the Niners are big on their chemistry, but if you're going to build fast, to me, the fastest way to get better would be like, give you an example. If suddenly Jalen Hurts got hurt today, right? And Tanner McKee stepped in, and Tanner McKee had, 3 straight games of 400 yards, and Tanner McKee looks like a starting NFL quarterback. Well, guess what? when Jalen Hurts gets healthy, you can now trade Tanner McKee or you can trade Jalen Hurts.
Yeah.
And the Niners, if Purdy had gotten hurt last year and Sam Darnold had played, who knows? Maybe they fell in love with Sam Darnold and traded Brock Purdy, or maybe they traded Sam Darnold and didn't let him walk away in free agency for nothing. I guess that's my long-winded way of saying, of these young quarterbacks who are all today busts, who's likely to be the next Baker, the next Darnold? Who's going to be the guy who's a bust today, but is going to be a reclamation project tomorrow? Like, and if you're Kyle Shanahan in the offseason, do you care about Brock Purdy's feelings, or do you want to have a Mac Jones as your number 2, or Zach Wilson as your number 2, and then maybe they're better than Brandon Allen, but if not, maybe they get a chance to play and you can trade them? I mean, what do you think? Are there any of those young quarterbacks that you think, you know what, they're not good now, but I think they'll be good eventually?
Look at Sam Darnold, too, and look at what he's doing with Minnesota. He's
right.
a borderline MVP candidate, and I think that him rehabbing a little bit, to use a word where he can rehab his confidence. He did that with San Francisco. He learned from Kyle Shanahan. He goes to another good offensive mind in Kevin O'Connell. He's been slinging that pill this year. He's been playing really well. So, look, of those players, like, there are things in sports and business and life that should never surprise us, right? And I went on this rant on my Instagram page after last week. People are shocked that Anthony Richardson is not accurate. He completed less than 55% of his passes at Florida, and people expect him to just be accurate at the next level. Now, I know Josh Allen was not that accurate as far as completion percentage at Wyoming, and he has been with the Buffalo Bills. He also got some really good coaching right away from Brian Daboll, who was able to really elevate him, and Daboll worked under Bill Belichick and Nick Saban. And so when you think about these young quarterbacks, I like to make this reference, and this is like classic Colin Cowherd, who is my sports broadcasting idol. But when you take a child who had no foundation, no stability, and there was chaos in that household at all times during his upbringing, and he didn't really have emotional or parental support, oftentimes that kid, when they grow up, they're not going to be successful. When you take a quarterback and you put him in a dog shit organization and he ends up not having a good coach, GM, good talent around him, there's chaos, there's drama, there's no stability, it's really hard for that quarterback to be successful. Sam Darnold with the Jets, Zach Wilson with the Jets. Anthony Richardson, I think, has good coaching with Shane Steichen, but he's just not an accurate player. And everybody just focuses on him being an insane athlete. There's so much to the quarterback position outside of being a good athlete. So with that being said, who could be the next Sam Darnold or Baker Mayfield? I would take a chance on Zach Wilson because now he's rehabbed with Sean Payton. I think if Daniel Jones goes somewhere, maybe he could end up being a decent player. I think Mac Jones might stink, but with Josh McDaniels as his offensive coordinator year one, he was on the all-rookie team, and I would be interested to see what he could do as a backup for Kyle Shanahan. So I think some of these players do stink, but I am intrigued by some of those other names right there.
Yeah, no, I mean, it just, and if you could, let's say you invest in Zach Wilson and Zach Wilson plays really, really well, there's still only about 25 good quarterbacks in a 32-team league. So, if a guy plays well, I mean, look at Sam Darnold. If Sam Darnold had played half the season last year, do you think the Niners would have traded him in the offseason? Or do you think they, I don't know I forget his contract situation. Was he going to just walk away no matter what? Or if he had played great, could they have retained him?
I think that he was leaving regardless. I think that he was out regardless. And like for Sam Darnold, I think he goes to Minnesota. He gets $9 million, I think, this year. The Niners were not paying $9 million. They got Josh Dobbs for cheap, and Brandon Allen is very cheap too. And I think that they knew that they needed to be financially smart at the quarterback spot. A bargain with Brock Purdy, a bargain with the backups, and Darnold was just a little bit too expensive. It's also weird when the backup's making like a ton more as compared to your starter.
I watch Anthony Richardson and I think to myself, if Anthony Richardson would just be in a good offense where he could just get the ball out of his hands and establish a little bit of a rhythm. I mean, this guy as a runner on third down has the potential to be one of the most incredible quarterbacks in the league. I mean, there's nobody in the history of football that has ever played the position who's as big and as fast as he is. Now, you got to be able to throw. You got to be able to make plays in the pocket. But I mean, I'm so intrigued by his skill set, which I know Chris Ballard is as well.
Yeah, look, the play that he made week 1 where he drops back, he slips, he like semi regains his footing, and then he launches a rocket downfield right in stride, a ridiculous throw. But then, you mentioned him being in an offense where he gets the ball out quickly. Who's to say he's even going to be able to hit the receiver in the flat because his accuracy is so up and down? I just think when a quarterback completes less than 55% in college, is there going to be a drastic change outside of Josh Allen where he's able to clean that up and all of a sudden become accurate? I'm just not sure. But that's why people fell in love with Anthony Richardson, because when you look at him, he's a freak athlete. I watched him play basketball in a couple of clips. He's dribbling through his legs, not breaking stride, throwing down hammers. He's launching rockets downfield, but can he hit the layup? That's always a problem. And that would drive Kyle Shanahan crazy if he just can't complete the easy throw, which is what Trey Lance couldn't do.
Well, it would be the most interesting thing is if Mac Jones came to the Niners because of all that speculation before the draft.
Get the ball out quick, accurately, on time, run the offense, be the point guard.
Yeah, I personally think that Mac Jones is pretty good. He played well as a rookie, then he went south from there. But I personally think that if you put him in a good situation, he might be okay. Now, he's not mobile, so that part is, his skill set's a little limited.